Swedish medium tank,
Pansarvärnskanonvagn IV.
Swedish medium tank
Pansarvärnskanonvagn IV.
is one of only 2 ground vehicles in the entire game that are placed at rank 3 while still having a very low battle rating. There are no other tanks that would meet conditions for daily and special tasks with a lower or at least equal battle rating. So naturally, during one of the Gaijin events, the
Pansarvärnskanonvagn IV.
attracted my attention because it seemed like the fastest way to farm the necessary points. Because the main requirement to participate is using a rank 3 vehicle, and lower BR meant that there are 3 things that help to get the points faster. First of all, low battle rating tanks usually play on smaller maps, which means less moving and more shooting. Secondly, most opponents will have more tanks in their setups, meaning that there are more targets to shoot, because at 3.0 even reserve vehicles are somewhat viable, and everyone has those by default. While at the higher tiers you will often meet players with only one premium vehicle who are leaving the battle after the first death. So after a few minutes the amount of players in battle reduces significantly, and it's difficult to complete tasks and get points when playing on mostly empty maps. And the third thing is both shameful but at the same time impossible to ignore. Playing with low battle rating vehicles will match you with similar opponents who often are new players who have not unlocked the endgame tanks yet, which makes it a lot easier to complete the necessary tasks since the opponents don't have much experience. Having these 3 things in mind, I've started playing the
Pansarvärnskanonvagn IV.
with intention to complete the tasks with minimal amount of time spent playing the game. So how does the
Pansarvärnskanonvagn IV.
compare to other vehicles, especially those you will be playing against? It was very helpful that this tank has APHE rounds, because it's one of the most effective shells in the game. Any penetration is usually a one-shot. Though it's not unusual for low battle rating tanks to have APHE rounds, so this tank is not better or worse than others in this regard. What made the
Pansarvärnskanonvagn IV.
stand out among others is the availability of APDS round. These are usually encountered at much higher tiers, so it was unusual to have it available. But their usefulness was limited when fighting only the most armored opponents, because APDS, despite having amazing penetration, do very little post-penetration damage, usually requiring to hit the enemy multiple times to destroy it. In the current state of the game, if you can find a way to penetrate a heavily armored enemy with APHE, it's always better to use APHE than any other type of shell. So APDS was a nice unexpected bonus. I always carried at least few of them just in case, but in most situations it wasn't useful. What was useful is that tank's cannon can be reloaded relatively fast. With aced crew it can be as fast as 4 seconds. Such a short reload saved me multiple times when I was able to reload faster than my opponents, especially when facing multiple enemies at once. Though at the same time you have to keep in mind that at low battle ratings you sometimes fight against tanks with very small cannons that can be reloaded even faster, so 4 seconds will not always be faster than your opponent. But on average, I felt like I had reload speed advantage more often. But having the cannon ready to fire is just part of the job. It also has to be pointed towards the enemy, and
Pansarvärnskanonvagn IV.
has a big problem with that. Turret rotation speed, in the best case scenario with all modifications and aced crew, is only 4.5 degrees per second. One of the worst turret rotations in the game. I had to aim my cannon in the direction where I expected to meet an opponent in advance, and if I was caught unprepared, facing the wrong direction, that usually ended up bad for me. On the other hand, cannon's horizontal guidance is great. Gun depression is up to 14 degrees, much more than most tanks can achieve, which is very helpful when playing hull down. At certain angles, the tracks are blocking the cannon, meaning that you won't be reaching the maximum gun depression at these points, but it's still way better than most other tanks. When it comes to defensive capabilities,
Pansarvärnskanonvagn IV
sometimes felt like a light tank or even a truck, because only the frontal armor is able to protect from high caliber machine gun fire, while anything more serious than that penetrates this tank anywhere. The only way for this vehicle to survive in the battlefield is staying unnoticed, and having no smoke screen does not help with that. Furthermore, there are only 3 crew members closely packed together, meaning that survivability of this medium tank is pretty bad. In most cases, even worse than light tanks you will be playing against. But do you know what about this tank doesn't feel like a light tank? The mobility.
Pansarvärnskanonvagn IV
It has a maximum speed of 45 and reverse of 5 kph. These speed values are not too different compared to other medium tanks of the same battle rating, but those vehicles usually are that slow because they have some armor, while this vehicle is just slow. In arcade, just like most tanks with little to no armor,
Pansarvärnskanonvagn IV
struggles to survive because of the name tags that makes hiding and ambushing opponents next to impossible. Most of the time they will know where you are going to show up and they will be ready to fire. On the other hand, turret rotation, despite still remaining an issue, becomes bearable, and increased acceleration makes the vehicle noticeably more maneuverable. Still, I think that
Pansarvärnskanonvagn IV
is even worse in arcade. Only the availability of APHE rounds still keeps it playable here, because post-penetration damage is one of the most impactful things in this game mode. This tank doesn't have any clear advantages, but has some serious downsides. The firepower is good, but somewhat comparable to other tanks, while defensive capabilities and turret rotation are very bad, which puts the
Pansarvärnskanonvagn IV
at disadvantage in most cases. The only good things that stand out are gun depression and availability of APDS rounds, but these things are situational and not going to affect the gameplay too much. I still think that it's easier to farm events and complete daily tasks with this tank, but only because
Pansarvärnskanonvagn IV
meets a lot of less skilled players because of its very low battle rating, and definitely not because it's a good tank in any way. I would rate
Pansarvärnskanonvagn IV
4 tired cannons resting on the cannon holder out of 10. Most medium tanks in other nations will probably perform better. The only unique thing about
Pansarvärnskanonvagn IV
is that it's rank 3 despite having a very low battle rating.
Pansarvärnskanonvagn IV